Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, guests of our session on the SDG 6 synthesis report and how we can all work together and mainstream this through our daily life work and for the betterment really of the conditions of the people who are affected by water in all its different forms. I would like to welcome you here today in Stockholm for this session at the World Water Week and online. I am really glad we will have a good time to discuss this here and to see what and how we can all work together on this topic. So first of all, I would like to just remind you that we have the SDG synthesis report on the SDG 6 that has been just published a month ago. So we have here the executive summary. Of course, that is all online. You can Google UN Water SDG 6 synthesis report and you will surely find our report online. And we have also summarized the main findings in a very short key message paper. So for everyone of us or for those whom you're working for who have no time, read the executive summary. You will find really the main and concise points there. I am really happy. I'm the vice chair of UN Water at the moment, and I am really happy that we have a discussion in the UN that goes beyond what we had some years ago. And this discussion, of course, has been influenced over the years. We have more and more prominent and pressing water issues in our countries. The people are more aware of it. That's in the media all the time. And of course, the private sector is also more and more interested, affected, and really linked to this problem and is coming in to resolve it. So with all this development, we had the water conference in March in New York. And this water conference has really reinforced some of the principles, the human right to water and sanitation, the fact that we are all in the same boat. The hydrological cycle is a global connector and phenomenon we cannot escape, not even if we're on a far remote island, it's somewhere in the Pacific or in the Atlantic or where. And water must be perceived as a beneficial good, not as a threat. We always frame water as, ooh, disasters, ooh, water quality problems, ooh, too expensive. But we must understand how we can use water as a positive agent in sustainable development. And against all this, we had a UN Water meeting just before this World Water Week here, where the UN family has agreed and decided to develop from all their good programs that they have a integrated one UN strategy for water that we will produce over the coming months, and that is really targeted at making sure that everybody is on board, that we are connected to the other sectors. We call this mainstreaming, and that we understand these positive linkages that water can offer us. And before we go into a panel discussion and into an interaction with you in the room here and with our participants online, I would like to invite my colleague and friend, Joachim Harlin, who is working in UNEP for water for a while and who is also our coordinator for the SDG expert group that we have in UN Water. So all the UN entities work together on different topics, and Joachim here is leading our group for the sustainable development, how we can align behind this topic. And he was also one of the lead authors for our synthesis report, and therefore I'd like to invite him to give you really the main parts of the report. So please explain what we have thought. Joachim.
Thank you so much, Johannes, and welcome all. Good to see you here. I'm going to take a little time to walk you through this report. So we won't rush it. We'll go through the main highlights. And I also would like to just acknowledge that we had two lead writers of this report. It was Kellyanne Naylor and Joshua Newton. And I had the honor to also coordinate and work with them and many others in preparing this report. So we call it a blueprint for acceleration. the SDG 6 synthesis report on water and sanitation. As Johannes said, what we did was we tried to synthesize the state of affairs when it comes to fresh water and SDG 6. We tried to capture the main findings of the conference, but we also tried to package this into action, and not the least action for the UN system, as this is a UN water publication. So, why this report matters now? So as I said, we're building on the lessons that we've had up to this point, and we want to provide a strategic response and make sure that we carry forward the valuable agreements, the energy, the action agenda, and the recommendations from the conference, and bring it up at the highest level and take that forward. And that can inform decision and actions at many levels, but not the least, we want to make sure that member states and the UN system can take this up to the highest level and bring it forward. So it was prepared by UN Water, and we included also our partners, and that's 35 UN agencies and 45 partner organizations. So it's quite a broad group behind this, and we managed to bring this together, so we try to speak with one voice. And in doing so, we try to also have a joint forward-looking collective vision on what needs to be done in the second half of Agenda 2030 and the decade on water. So, as a blueprint, it might be a little bit ambitious to talk about a blueprint, but we use that as a metaphor. Because a blueprint gives you some kind of design on what action and how to build and implement, right? So we want to see how can we put SDG 6 progress on track and accelerate, and not the least how we in the UN system can support that SDG 6 acceleration. So this is a little bit of an infographic which we presented in the report and summarizes the state of play along all the indicators under SDG 6. And I'm not going to read out all this, it's kind of a bit tiny, but here we summarize it a little bit. And we can see from our progress reporting from member states on these targets that we are lagging behind quite severely. If we go to drinking water, we've concluded that we need to accelerate and sixfold the pace if we are to reach the target by 2030. Sanitation 5 times, hygiene 3 times, and so forth. So we can also go to look at water quality and see that that's also lagging behind. We have many households that are suffering because of wastewater is not treated properly, and we have ecosystems that are also being degraded. And this also links to the topic of biodiversity that we were talking about before. Water quality, freshwater ecosystem degradation is very much related also to biodiversity challenge. Climate change is hitting hard. We see that's impacting also on biodiversity, but also on food security. And the rapid changes in the observations of available fresh water and flow. We can call it surface water here. If we go then to integrated water resources management, which is target 5, SDG 6.5, we can see that we need to, in 651 in particular, we need to double the pace if we are to achieve IWRM in the higher quartile across the world. And only one SDG region is on track when it comes to the transboundary element of 652. So we can see also that we're heading the wrong way financially. Maybe this is one of the reasons why we're lagging behind also, and we're not walking the talk on inclusivity and bringing everybody with us. So this might seem a little bit doom and gloom, but that's actually where we're starting from. We've had we had half time now. We're in the locker room, we're talking to the team, and look, we're not performing well enough. We have to shape up for the second half. So how can we do that? How can we put SDG 6 back on track and accelerate? So we have the SDG 6 acceleration framework, and here, UN Water, we have framed this under these 5 headings: data and information, capacity development, financing, governance, and innovation. And especially at this World Water Week, we've had innovation as one of the themes, overarching themes, and we've been talking quite a lot about that, and it's been very encouraging. So let's look a little bit at the obstacles blocking the way, and I think many of you would say, well, we've heard this all before, but unfortunately this is the case still. So there's not enough funding, there's not enough data, we lack on capacity at many levels, not just on skills, but also on institutional capacities, and you could say sectoral capacities to enable SDG 6 to advance, which very much links to this discussion about mainstreaming. How can we become relevant and mainstream across processes in country? There's not enough innovation, and especially maybe not enough innovation in not just technologies, but also in governance, in management, and other elements that are important. And then there's not enough coherence. So we need to address all these by making sure the funding gets there. We need innovation there, new investments. We might need to discuss and reform the global development finance architecture to make sure that we can bring more money to advance. We need to look at the monitoring, and here we know for sure there's a large need. There are a lot of data gaps on many, many levels, and we need many, you could say, much more information related to water quality, related to water quantity, also on the service side of things, and water efficiency across the board. Here, innovation is very important, and we're also trying to tap in and use big data, Earth observations, but also not just that, also using maybe local knowledge and citizen science. So here we need to have a discussion, how can we improve the information that informs decision making and informs and advances implementation. We need to invest in people. We need to, I talked about innovation, and cooperation, of course, and partnerships is going to be essential. So let's look a little bit here what we have recommended and what's needed within the UN system itself. So we think that we need to work much more with the mainstreaming aspect. We talk about getting out of our silo, and this is very much around that. But we know that there are many national and global processes that are so water-related, water-dependent, and where we can catalyze and advance them, and they would benefit very much if we brought water into it. And I'm talking about, of course, climate change, I'm talking about health, food, energy, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity frameworks, among other things. We concluded from the conference, and this is also captured in the outcome of the conference and in our report, that we cannot wait 47, 50 years to have proper intergovernmental discussions on SDG 6 and its related topics. So a regular intergovernmental process, meetings and conferences is important. We've also looked at ourselves and seen that we need to bring the water agenda also to the top of our own members, our own UN agencies. So the UN leadership needs to get actively involved. And this is something we have discussed now in UN Water and agreed that we're going to start a process where we convene our principles on an annual basis. We need to bring what we do from the global to the regional to the national level. So we are looking at how can we strengthen those connections, how can we support the UN country teams, how can we make sure that the wealth of knowledge and expertise and funding is available to them, and that the coordination happens also where it really matters, on the ground. We just decided here at our meeting before the Water Week that we would develop a UN system-wide strategy on water and sanitation. I was in a session yesterday and they asked me, when will it be ready? Can we have it by October? And I think that's a little ambitious, but we're definitely embarking on this ambition. We're trying to do it quickly, but as you know, developing such a strategy will involve consultations with across the board at many levels. But this is called for. And we also understand that there will be a GA resolution that is trying to also put this in place and call for such a system-wide strategy on water and sanitation. Looking now at our own programs is not only about engaging our leadership, it's about also strengthening our programs and upscaling what we do so that we in the UN system can actually have more impact. And to do this, we also need to coordinate better between ourselves, and in the report also has some suggestions on how we can strengthen the UN water coordination mechanism itself. So with that, I conclude and hand back to you, Johannes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joachim, for nicely rolling out what we have been thinking about and writing down over, I don't know, when did we start this discussion? Almost a year ago. Yeah. About how we could assess and frame and propose to resolve SDG 6 and all the related adjacent impacts and fields. So that I think is clear. We really need to understand water as one of the components of development of our environment, of the social world we live in. And of course, it's related to economy and the business. So I think we have given you a little bit of an overview, what's in our synthesis report. And I would now like to invite Rachel. She is leading the research in the International Water Management Institute, and she will introduce our panelists and moderate. And Rachel, the stage is yours for the next session.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. As we've heard, this report is really important. This is all about how do we get to that second half and deliver in the second half of a very important game that we all have to win. So what we need to do is we need to take this report and mainstream it. We're all responsible for implementing it and bringing the actions with it. So we have a panel now, and our panelists are wonderful because they represent many different parts of the organizations that will mainstream. So I'm going to invite the panelists to come up onto the stage. So Mohammed, Kristen, Mina, Hannah and Claudia, if you could join me on stage. Dr. Mohammed Diatta, he is the coordinator, Mohammed, for the unit for the follow-up, promotion and popularization of the recommendations of the 9th World Water Forum. And I love the fact that you're also Senegal's Sherpa on the high-level international panel on water investments. And we heard how important investment is in Africa, and a member of the coordination team for UN 2023 for Senegal. Kristen is a program management officer at the UNDRR and has extensive experience in fostering dialogue across sectors, disciplines and levels of governance through the whole area of disaster risk management, which we need to have. Mina Gullah is always a pleasure to have here. As most of us know, she is a founder of Running Blue and a global campaign dedicated to solving the water crisis. And we know your activism is so terribly important. Hannah O is the International Stakeholder Engagement Lead for Bayer. And international organizations, the commercial sector, private sector, you're leading in so many areas, and we really want to hear about what you're doing in that. And Claudia Pren, Miss Claudia Pren is the International Water Association for Young Water Professionals. And I was hearing this morning at breakfast about the fantastic young professional session yesterday. It sounded like the most fun and vibrant session, which we'd all wish we could be young again in that. So, Mohammed, I'm going to ask you the first question. The UN system is working to mainstream water in all relevant intergovernmental processes. This came from the UN leadership, but will only work if UN member states actively promote and implement this in a coordinated way. How could member states advance and achieve mainstreaming water in all relevant intergovernmental processes?
Thank you, moderator. It's an honor to me to be here representing Senegal at this session. And I will focus my remarks on Africa.
Please, please.
On Africa, mainly on Africa. Why? Because on Africa, we have an intergovernmental process called AMCAO.
Yes,
It's
yes.
African Ministerial Council on Water, who work a lot about monitoring water at the continental level and to see where we are and where we must go for the future. And as you know, water and sanitation and hygiene are fundamental in Africa economic transformation. But progress has been slow in Africa in reaching our continental water targets. And as highlighted by AMCAO report, AMCAO 2023 report, Africa is not on track to achieve the SDGs. This was also highlighted by the blueprint. Yes, and indeed, report indicates that mainly 400 million Africans do not have access to water. 800 million Africa do not have access to sanitation. This means that the blueprint report comes just at the right time, and it provides crucial insight as well as concrete path for mobilization, for mobilizing financement, stakeholders, and country on direction. In Senegal, we are committed to finding solution to this issue on strengthening our water resilience. We already implementing measures to strengthen our water infrastructure and build resilience to climate change. We have launched several initiatives to improve water management, including the development of national water policies and action plan to finance water infrastructure by 2050. And it's a long-term vision that we are building on water security in South Africa. But to reach this, I think that political will is crucial to attend SDGs. This is why Senegal, after the conference, the UN conference, Senegal has committed also, is committed to achieve some goals. We have the blueprint, the Blue Deal. We have the Dakar Action Plan on rivers. We have also the panel on Africa. And we are also engaged with Tajikistan, Netherlands, on a resolution in UN. This is to give a new momentum to water, to push what have been said in New York, and to have a clear agenda on water. And at global stage also, President Macky Sall launched the high-level panel for investment in Africa, for Africa investment in water at COP27. And the Africa Investment Program on water show what is possible when partners come together with a common purpose to scale and accelerate water security in Africa. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that water security and climate adaptation are crucial, the most significant challenge facing Senegal, Africa, and the world. The blueprint is a critical tool in our arsenal to combat now this challenge, but we need more support from the international community to scale up and implement more water projects on ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, and thank you for sharing not only those startling figures, but also the way that that Africa, through the AMCAO, through your leadership in Senegal, we were all in the World Water Forum last year. We could see where you're trying to drive that, but also that high-level panel on investment into water in Africa. I was able to join that session at the COP last year, and the clarity of vision, there was a very clear roadmap of where you needed to do. We just had to mobilize the funds and then the infrastructure and the development to be able to bring that. So thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. Kristen, Ms. Maya, UNDRR is a valuable member of UN Water, and we've only got to see the terrible reports on droughts and floods to see the importance of your agency. UNDRR has been working closely with UN Water to incorporate disaster risk reduction into water process. So it's undertake all sorts of efforts to align not only the Water Action Decade, but the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2023. How can UN entities take water into consideration as a priority when working on other areas?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of points in that question, and thank you very much for that. I would kind of like to start with a few reflections on what we heard the last few days. From our perspective, we feel like we've come already a long way because we no longer have to make the case of why it's important to talk about resilience or why we need to talk about the interlinkages between water and climate change, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity. I think we've come to a point where we understand those linkages need to be made. And we're ready to talk about how we can make this happen. And I think we're not right there yet in figuring out how we do this. But I feel like through the conversations over the last 2 days, especially, we have started this conversation to understand what can we as individual agencies and organizations do, but also how, more importantly, how can we do this as a collective, as a community. And I think the discussions we've been having, especially during the UN Water meeting, have really kind of also highlighted how can we come together as a UN system, together with partners, together with countries and states. So it's really, really good that Senegal is here as well and joining forces with the Netherlands and Tajikistan, because one of the issues that we discussed was actually it's a very political issue and we need to kind of come from different sides. So you have the side, of course, of the member states that need to either pass resolutions or pass other documents through the UN or through conventions that help us reinforce the message. But also as a UN system, we can do a lot. So as UNDRR, we tried very hard to use the opportunity of the coinciding midterm reviews of the Water Action Decade and as well as the Sendai framework to put water more on the agenda. And I think we were very successful to do this and mainstream it into the UN 2023 Water Conference, especially through Interactive Dialogue 3, which focused on water for climate, resilience, and environment. And I think it really put some conversations on the agenda that we were not having in the past. As it comes to the Sendai framework, and this is why I said it's really also politically driven, maybe we were not as successful. However, I do think that acknowledging the outcomes of the Water Conference in the political declaration on the midterm review of the Sendai framework and also highlighting water as a key sector in two of the calls to action in the political declaration as well really helps us as an agency to also keep this topic alive and to really highlight again why water is so important. We know from Sendai framework monitoring reports that, for example, infrastructure is very much affected. We know that nearly 95% of infrastructure is destroyed or lost because of water-related hazards. So this is really something that we're driving forward. I could say more, but I think I will stop here for now and let other colleagues speak as well.
Thank you, Kristen. In those startling images, I'm sure many of you saw those startling images from Pakistan last year, and just whole structures being washed away from the force of those floods. So yes, linking through and ensuring that we do bring water into the Sendai as well as into our own action agendas is very important. Mina, turning to you now, as someone who's run 200 marathons over last year, you've probably seen more issues. You've probably seen more of the challenges of water and sanitation on the ground and the solutions there than many of us here in the room. So we all know the urgency of the problems, but what do you think, and why do you think there hasn't been more action until now, and how can mainstreaming water help?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel, and it's great to be here and have another opportunity to talk about the importance of the synthesis report, but also to talk about the importance of driving action. So the first thing I will share with you is that it's important to recognise that we're talking here about driving more action, not driving action at all. I have seen action on the ground, whether it's the leadership of organisations like Bayer, who have been investing huge amounts of money and resources to develop new seeds and mechanisms to drive more water efficiency in the production of crops. Whether it's in places like Africa, where I witnessed firsthand companies like Zambia Sugar, who are working incredibly hard to completely revolutionise and deploy regenerative agriculture in their operations, or whether it's people in their own homes in places across South Africa and other places who are figuring out how to reuse their water, putting buckets under showers. We can't underestimate the power of harnessing the people to help all of us to drive change. But we all agree we're here because we need to do more. These are small steps, and we need to be thinking big picture. We need to create a moonshot which says we are going to solve this water crisis. And to do that, we need to think big, and we need to harness the power of people, companies, and governments everywhere. So if I reflect on why we're not seeing more change, and believe me, we need change. We need action. I have seen the devastation and the consequences firsthand of our water crisis. Whether it's the melting of the glaciers high above the mountains of Tajikistan, where I climbed up there on one of my runs and I literally saw valleys that used to be filled with ice and snow completely empty, where I heard experts tell me there used to be 1,000 glaciers in these mountains and they've now gone. I ran across the Aral Sea, used to be the 4th biggest ocean in the world, now desert sands. I wended my way through the carcasses of fishing boats and I witnessed what happens when we do not act. So why aren't we acting more? To be honest, I think it's basically 3 things. So I think the first thing is we have what I've called water blindness. We've failed to educate the broader community about why we have a water problem, the fact that a water problem even exists, and the nature and extent of that and the impact on people's operations. And I think we have to do better at increasing awareness, particularly amongst governments and amongst companies, not only of the problem, but how they're connected to it, and most importantly, the urgency and the need to act now. The second is we're lacking a cohesive set of comprehensive asks. So when I go and talk to companies, the first question is, well, do we really have a water problem? Is it really affecting us? And once they get through that, which happens pretty quickly, I've got to say, when you start to talk about not just the numbers, but the stories and the impact that this is having on supply chains, once you get through that, the next question is, what do you want us to do? And the problem here is, particularly on the NGO side, there is a plethora of asks. They get pitched by everybody saying, we need you to do this and this and this and this. And if you only did my thing, then we would solve this water crisis. We need to get better at coming up with a comprehensive set of asks that give companies a blueprint and a pathway forward. And the third thing is, and this is like pretty key to why we even began Run Blue and why we're building and building and building this momentum, and that is the word momentum. When I started running, I was one crazy woman in the middle of a desert running and shouting about this amazing water crisis that we had that was on our doorstep. By the time I finished my 200th marathon on the steps of the United Nations at the opening of the water conference, we had thousands and thousands of people in over 200 countries and territories stepping up and saying, we also care about water. We have built the largest global grassroots movement on water in history. Those people are out there. They are on the front lines of this problem. They see it, they understand it, they're stepping up for it, and they're asking all of you, everybody, everywhere, to take action to solve it. We need to continue to harness that momentum and build both a bottom-up and a top-down approach to solving this crisis. And I think when we start to do that, when we start to recognise that water is everything, but for too long we've treated it as if it's nothing, that there is momentum behind change, we've got the leadership to build and create something different, then we'll finally start to see the momentum around action that we need. Not the small steps, but the big, bold, ambitious game changers, the commitments to those moonshots that is what is needed to solve this water crisis.
Thank you, Mina. And that was wonderful to hear that there is real belief at the ground, on the ground, as you're running, as the people. Those are the people that are really experiencing the water crisis, and are also the ones who are stepping up to try and bring in those solutions, and individual activism and all collective activism, all the way through to government activism and into government. So thank you very much for that, Mina. Hannah, the private sector. We've been hearing all week about the great work of Bayer. So as a key sector in advancing water and sanitation issues, what do you think on how to mainstream water in all relevant processes, and how can we incentivize the private sector to take more actions?
Thank you so much. So as Bayer, which is one of the largest food as well as health company, we know the effects of climate change as well as water deeply into our operations, because we're all about food loss, protecting food loss, crop loss, especially to the most vulnerable communities. So it's just sharing a little bit about Bayer's journey. I think it all started actually thanks to Johannes and Mina actually a couple of years ago. Mina completely ignited our hearts and really opened our hearts to the topic of water. And that's how Bayer started the journey together with Mina on Run Blue campaign. Internally, all our employees were extremely motivated to be part of the water journey. And with Johannes as well, Bayer was one of the early ones to really be the private sector voice to lead policy discussions along with 9 other UN agencies, with WMO, to really put this on the forefront of leadership when it comes to private sector. And I just wanted to call out a few examples where I see large-scale impact where private sector could really play a role. And that has to start with really thinking about business model. How do we embed water into our business model in the core of what we do? Otherwise, it is not sustainable. It will just be left out as a CSR activity. And so 3 initiatives I'd like to call out that was really a bold statement that we have announced during the UN Water Conference in March. One is really around resilient agriculture. We know that 70% of fresh water is consumed in agriculture. Half of global emission comes from the food sector. So we have a very deep role to play in ensuring that there is no one left behind when it comes to food security through water, addressing water. So one of the key crops that we have started targeting was rice. I know it is a very tiny little seed and crop that you might not think about deeply when you're having it 3 times a day in Asia in particular. It's the 3rd most important crop, grown by 150 million people. And most of these farmers that are growing rice are smallholder farmers, right? So it requires a lot of trust building when we want to practice, when we want to introduce the right agronomic practices to avoid transplanted rice to moving to direct seeded rice, which is some of the key to solving the water consumption, intensity of water when it comes to crop system of growing rice. So we've started in India, where we have introduced specific genetics, varieties, agronomic practices, digital innovation, mechanization, along with other partners that could really help us go to market to these 150 million farmers across the world to introduce the concept. It's not a new concept. Direct seeded rice is not a new concept. It has been around. However, it requires a lot of trust building, a lot of understanding about cultural norms, and how do we get farmers to move and help kind of take away that friction points. So this is really where collective action, it becomes really important across many other parties, with local governments, with municipality leaders, with local leaders who can really unlock that dialogue. Second one is around really our footprint to the smallholder rural communities. Throughout the whole week, I've heard a lot about gender when it comes to WASH, right? It's usually the responsibility of women and children who are in charge of fetching water. Bayer has one of the key businesses for us is women's health business. And we've made a commitment through our Nutrient Gap Initiative to reach 50 million people to actually provide the right vitamins, minerals, family planning, and we cannot do that unless we have access to clean water. So there are many opportunities to really bring in water as a key part of what we do every day, as part of our core business strategy. And I think this is kind of where it was, with the time urgency that it requires, we don't have a lot of time to another 10 years to think about what is the solution to scaling this up. So this is my kind of message to other private sector partners to really think beyond the charitable aspects of water, but really how do we embed it in what our employees are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think with intergovernmental processes, we're really looking forward to what's going to happen in COP. Because during COP, I think its first day, there will be a full day dedicated how water intersects with health and water intersects with food. And I think with only these kind of connected approach, we can really start unlocking the power of what we can achieve for water crisis. So with that, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah. And you've spoken exactly to one of the key points. We have to break down the silos. That is part of that blueprint. And you're showing we need to bring water and food in, water and health, water in many different investments and developments to be able to deliver on this water and sanitation. It isn't just in the wash sector that we can deliver the benefits in wash sector, that we need to catalyse that change. Claudia, one of the great we've seen over the last 5 years is this growing engagement of youth activists, young professionals, bringing energy, ideas, and change to the discussions here, where we seasoned professionals are just sort of rather sage and slightly samey, whereas we are loving everything that's coming through with those discussions. So, Claudia, youth groups are often taking part in policy processes for pushing leaders to be more bold, but there's a clear need for youth to move from advocacy to advisory. We don't just want you saying we want you to be part of the change because of the professional insight that you bring. How do you think this can be done in a productive way? And how are youth groups in water connecting to youth groups working on other areas such as biodiversity, climate and energy?
Thank you very much for the question. And first of all, thank you for recognizing that we need to move from an advocacy position to an advisory position. The youth movement is very diverse, and this happens also when we talk about inclusion. We are not a monolith, as well as gender is not a monolith, and indigenous peoples are not monoliths. So when we talk about the youth movement, there's a lot of different people that make up this movement. When talking about young professionals, I would like to see that we start to recognize them as professionals, not only as a youth representative. So we have so many amazing, talented people in the movement with so many different knowledges, experiences, that we're kind of wasting at this point just asking about the youth perspective and not their technical knowledge. Sorry, but to read here on the key messages, there's obstacles blocking progress, and some of these obstacles, I believe youth can help a lot here. Not enough data. We always get lumped together, youth, technology, we're so good with computers, but it's not only social media, data, technology, we are good at that as well. We can help with this point, but not only processing data. We have to remember the youth that are on the ground, the field engineers. Normally we start our careers there on the field, taking the data that we are later going to analyze. So let us help here. Not enough capacity. We are the ones needing that capacity building as well. Mentorship. We need spaces like these ones so we can learn, we can build capacity to be able to solve this problem. Not enough innovation. Another key word that is often linked to youth, innovation. We have normally different points of view, but it's so hard to be a young innovator as well because we represent more risks when it comes to financing, when it comes to traditional financing mechanisms, especially in the water sector, is already very hard. Imagine being a youth innovator. I talked yesterday with some of the IDB FEMSA award winners, and their ideas are amazing. And they always say the same thing. We need mentorship and we need investment. Not enough coherence. And here we talk about collaboration, but also institutional weaknesses, fragmentations, and lack of continuity. we are the continuity, we are the memory. So if you include us in these discussions, we're going to be able to continue the conversation and to say the 3 words that young professionals and recent graduates hate the most: previous experience required. So let us have that experience once we are in your positions. Let us get that experience first. Then I would like to say, support our actions. We love being invited to the dialogues, to be invited at these spaces, but we also need support in our actions. I'm here today at Tiwi because of the Young Professional Ticket sponsored by Arab, because otherwise it would be very hard for me to be here. And most of the youth movement is purely volunteer work, but we have to recognize that volunteer is a privilege. Not all young people that want to help can afford to be volunteers. So we also need some support to bring these diverse voices. I work with so many amazing people in Young Water Professionals Ecuador. We have people from indigenous communities, and we can't bring them because we lack the funding. Our advocacy has been mainly free, so please, let's not make our advisory free as well. That's what we're asking here. And to the last part of the question, I would like to say, as the youth movement, we can't really afford to work in silos because we are already facing a lot of challenges. So the Global Youth Movement for Water has several associations from other sectors like energy, like climate change, agriculture. In our session later today, there's the International Association of Students in Agriculture that is going to be present. So we are trying to build this intersectoral movement as well, because young people tend to change interests very often. So you start on water, you end up in agriculture, but you keep the connections. So this global youth movement is very diverse in that aspect as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia. And I think we should be calling you early career professionals, not youth. Yeah. I think we need to sort of we need to respectfully address where you are in your work. Yesterday, Digital Earth Africa was launched, and this is a cross-Africa platform for data. So one of the areas you talked about was the lack of data, and it's the young professional programmers who are really making this phenomenal resource come to pass. So it's yes, your young early career skills are very important, and we know that we need you. And one of the, as part of IMI, we are involved with we have these programs and projects which is all about small and medium enterprises and bringing investors. It's sort of like a dating where we have the investors and we have the small and medium enterprises come together. So many of them are led by young entrepreneurs and innovators, and they are attracting the investment because they are thinking these solutions. If we can have that early investment, we can really scale up so their ideas and innovation are going to be part of the solution that's going to deliver this blueprint. So we see it in many different areas. We have 7 minutes left. So I'm going to ask this wonderful panel one question. We've heard about governments, we've heard about UN organizations, activists, early career researchers, and private sector. Who else would you like to partner to bring about the ideas held in this blueprint? So anybody, who else, who are the other partners we need to have in this room if we're going to mainstream this?
I can start.
Please, Mohammed.
I think that we need to mobilize players outside the water box.
Players outside the water box,
because if, for example, in the context of transboundary cooperation, we need to build resilience. We need to build dams. We need to build infrastructure. If we have this partnership with outside actors outside the water box, can be useful. We need also to think beyond SDG 6 if we want to succeed the SDG 6. But also, I think that in our analysis, we don't keep in mind that we are not in a quiet world. We are in a world of crisis, of tension, of climate crisis also. What is our strategy to give water to those who are in humanitarian context? What is the global strategy on this? It is this is illegible for me. And climate migrant being increased in Africa, there will be maybe more than 35 million in 2027. And we need to act if we want to solve this problem. We need also to increase cooperation, North-North cooperation, South-South, and North-South cooperation, cross-sectoral cooperation. This is very important if we want to meet SDGs. And also the importance of science, innovation, and knowledge management. This is very important if you want to succeed in the SDGs fight. This is my contribution.
So we need to take this crisis, we need to take that conflict and use it to mobilise to make sure water goes higher up the political priorities. There's never a good crisis when it affects people on the scale that you're talking about. Well, we do have to use that, and we welcome that. Kristen.
Just listening to what you just said, I think while I would count myself as maybe being in the water box, I don't think my institution is.
Okay.
So I think we're already moving beyond it, and there's a lot of internal advocacy that we're doing within our organizations, but also beyond, to make connections between different topics, processes, and agendas. And the same goes for moving beyond SDG 6. I think we also heard this yesterday in the high-level panel on the follow-up of the water conference. In conclusion, that maybe the UN is too focused on SDG 6. But again, from our perspective as UNDRR, looking at the Sendai framework and trying to make these connections, I think we're moving way beyond looking just at one SDG. We're connecting specifically to SDG 11, which talks a lot about disaster risk reduction and other SDGs.
And 13 and
yeah, like I think we know that it's cross-cutting all over. Science, I completely agree. But maybe one last point, and this is also a key message that my director reiterated yesterday in the high-level panel as well, is one key factor within the Sendai framework, and I think the water community, as we have heard from a survey that we conducted in the context of the midterm review, is that it's really appreciated to have the whole of society, all of government approach very much integral to the implementation of such frameworks. And I think it's critical for us to keep connecting with local communities that we're trying to serve and to involve them in the decision-making processes. We have in particular one commitment under the Water Action Agenda, which very much addresses locally led activities and solutions, and we work with partners on the ground to achieve this. So I think, yes, partnering and also taking those who are at risk with us.
Okay, thanks very much. Mina, Hannah, or Claudia, I've got 2 minutes. Any other partners? Who else do we have to have in the room?
Yeah, firstly, I think that there is a massive group of people that's missing from this discussion, and that's the Indigenous voices.
Yeah.
We need to do much, much better, and including the voices from the people on the ground. I call it radical inclusivity, figuring out ways to bring the voices of the people here. One of the Indigenous community leaders that I met when I was in Australia running across the desert said to me, Mina, decisions would be better if leaders could understand that things are different on the land. The role of Indigenous communities will help us to convert and change and accelerate change. But I also want to be very provocative towards the end of this session, which is, it's very easy when things are going wrong, and we see in the synthesis report that we are going backwards in progress, not forwards. Things are definitely going wrong, and it's very tempting to look out and not look in, to think and point and search for answers outside our house rather than looking inside and saying, in these conversations around water, we are incredibly fortunate. We have the private sector, we've got governments, we've got civil society, we have the United Nations, the power of the whole UN here. So why are we not going and doing more? And why are we going backwards instead of forwards? And I think that's going to require a bit of assessment internally. Like, what is it that's stopping more companies? Why did it take me having a conversation with Bayer, then Johannes, everybody else having that conversation to get Bayer to act? Yeah. Why are all the other companies that are here this week not doing more? Why are there not CEOs here? You know, why are there not heads of state? What is it that's stopping water from accelerating within these organisations and these structures? And I think that's a conversation we need to have, not how do we bring more in, how do we do more with what we've got?
And I think at the UN Water meeting we had on Friday, it was all about communication. We need to be smarter about communication with, and getting that messages out. I think that's some of the conversation there. Hannah, quickly.
I'd love to see a little bit more technology innovators
yep.
Outside of the water sector to come in. We've talked about finance, data, and I think even yesterday in one of the sessions was also decentralization. Right? So I think there's a lot of ways that we can tap into novel technologies, and I'd love to welcome more of the startup ecosystems to also be part of this platform.
Fantastic, Hannah. Early career research or early career professional thoughts?
Just very quickly, I think it's pretty much the same as everybody has been talking about, but when talking about the ground, we also need to recognize the language barriers. Because in Latin America, for instance, it's very hard because of the language barrier. So the people that we are here, we need to represent those voices first and not only our own. And then when we talk about academia and research, we say, yeah, they're included, but I'm a hydrologist and I have two water worlds in my head. One is technical, hydrology panels and everything, and the other is this one. And they normally don't merge together, so I agree that the technical side of science has also need to be brought into these discussions.
And as someone who's a scientist who leads science and research, we always find at these global dialogues that they go, yeah, your science is great, but we're going to do the business over here. We need to get that connected. So I'm sure you've enjoyed this panel discussion as much as I have, and I'm sure you would like to show your appreciation. Thank you, panelists. And we're now going to hand back to Johannes for you the audience, to have a part of the discussion now. Johannes.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, and thank you for panelists for all your good input. I would also now be a bit off the protocol. I want to invite Joachim to be with me here and to discuss together with you in the remaining time that we have. I really think this was a really good panel. Two little reflections on that, just as a intro into our discussion from my side, and then Joachim can also add to that. I remember when I was in primary school, the people told me, one teacher told me, oil is going to run out in 2040 or 50 or so. And I asked, okay, what then? Will we not have lights? I'm still going to be alive, you're going to be dead, but I will be alive. Do we not have lights in 2040? And he said, no worries, we will have nuclear power and other power and everything will be good. So the solution was in technology and out there. It wasn't my problem. And the teacher, and I believed that because I was 6 years old or 7. So now we know it doesn't work like that. We cannot just, and Mina, you've said it, we cannot just look outwards. It's us. We have to resolve this all together. And it's youth and it's refugees and indigenous, but also the business leaders and unfortunately, mostly the old guys who call the shots in this world. So, and the other little thing is, I remember when I was in the house of my grandfather, same age, and he always told me, turn off the light, that costs money. And now in my own home, my children run around and they turn off the light after you leave the room because they say, hey, this is hurting the environment. They're not interested in the money. They think differently. And I think those two things, we can't look outside. We can't expect somebody to resolve the problem sometime. And the other awareness that it's not only about money. Only growth will not save the planet. We need to go from an extractive system to an inclusive system, and that's not only in mining and business, that's also in politics and policy and social cohesion and in how we deal with the environment. I think those are some of the principles that we need to really have in the back of our minds when we want to go into mainstreaming, when we want to be inclusive, and when we want to find the communities we need. Joachim, maybe you also want to reflect for a minute or two, and then we have some online discussion already. I will address that briefly, and then we will take questions from the floor and online.
Yeah, thank you. No, this was so inspirational. Just some random reflections almost. I'm not going to try to attempt to summarize the discussion. But on youth and the role of youth and engaging youth, I was quite inspired by seeing so many youth moderators here at the World Water Week this year in all sorts of sessions, and that's really nice. And to engage youth and also when we hear about issues, trying to take what we're talking about in this context, and when we talk about mainstreaming, that it's not just about getting out of the silos thematically, but it is also like silos between conferences and high-level events and what happens actually on the ground all the way down to indigenous peoples, right? There's a little bit of a disconnect there. So bridging science and policy, but also to practice. And I was intrigued by hearing, also this desire to build experience. And personally, I feel you might see me often in contexts like this, but I did not start in the UN. I started, first in research, but I'm very grateful that I had a long spell of years where I worked in country, in projects. You could call it on the ground with the stakeholders there in developing countries and could sort of gain also first-hand experience. And I think what we need to do, not everybody is fortunate enough to do that, but at least that we make those connections. I really want to see that what we're talking about in this report, obviously we need to do our best to anchor it at the highest level and catalyze that change that is needed at that level to filter in. But it's also important that we bring it from the other direction and we make sure that this doesn't stay, in a global conference sphere or something like that, right? In a nice publication, but we really make it tangible and practical. These are some inspiring thoughts that I got from the discussion.
Okay, cool. So let us go into a more participatory mode here. It's always good if two friends talk on the stage, but of course we want to interact really with you. And the first thing, I've been made aware that there's a very lively discussion in the online chat on conflict situations on refugees and I think that is one topic. Our next World Water Development Report and World Water Day will be about leveraging water for peace. So I think that's very clearly an indication that whole topic about conflict zones, about forced migration, about unfair and unjust situations around the planet is a very urgent issue. It's human rights related. It's not only water and sanitation or access to clean water and sanitation human right. It's about the whole of the human dignity and the right to a healthy environment. So I think that is one very big and important topic. Are we doing enough about this yet? No. But we will address that in the coming year, because we will produce, of course, another report in the UN on that. We are working with the special representative, Pedro, on these issues, and we surely have that in the focus in trying to provide practical solutions for these instances where we have conflict that is either expressed through water or over water. So with that, I would like to open the floor really. Is somebody here in the room? We have people with microphones. for you. If you indicate that you want to talk, we can take your question, and also online, of course. I trust that we will know when we have online questions. So please, the floor is open. We have somebody in the back. I have to look against the light. Even if I know you, I can't see who you are. So please quickly introduce you and let us know.
My name is Kai Zimmermann. I'm representing Therme Group operating 3 facilities in Germany. As well, I'm founded an NGO working in communication in Europe with projects in Senegal, Nigeria and DRC. And I have 2 questions or remarks. One is, how would you ensure that small and mid-sized NGOs and companies are on board every time, not only in the opening process, sondern as well as the ongoing project? And the second one is, it's a good summarize in your paper, but I believe we should deliver more benefits to speed up to individuals, to companies, to villages, that we speed up our momentum. What do you think on engage benefits to the actors? Thanks.
Yeah, I think that is a good question. And small and medium-sized enterprises are certainly a very big part of the solution. We have the big global players like Bayer or like some of the other companies that are here, but small and medium-sized enterprises are the ones that can really penetrate, I think, much more into direct actions and transactions with local economy that must also develop there. And now I will say something that might not be appreciated by everybody, but I mean, for hundreds of years, first we drained our own soils in Europe. Then when there was nothing more to drain, we went to Africa and other places around the world and sucked up the resources there. So all this situation that we have on the planet is because somebody has, somebody went somewhere to extract something that was really maybe, not for them to extract there. So we have always gone south and got more resources, but there is no more going south anymore. There is no resource that we can't go south anymore. The south is already exploited, and we know now that it is one planet. So for these small and medium-sized enterprises, I think what needs to be done is we probably need to de-risk transaction between small and medium-sized enterprises that come from, I don't know, very many different places. And Mohammed has said it, we need more interactions between North and South and South and South. And the 2 ideas I have is we need more communication around opportunities that cannot be done only by the small-sized enterprise, because you don't probably have a communications department. So there must be a facility for that. And then there must be really a de-risking for those interactions, because if you go into a new business idea, but you have to, your risk is 30% of your turnover of the year, then you might not want to do it. So communication and de-risking, I think, need to be provided, and maybe we can include that into the UN water strategy. Yeah. Thanks for that question. Yeah. We have another one in the back, I think.
Okay, while we wait for that, maybe I think that the 2 questions were actually related, because I think that if you involve small and medium-sized NGOs and companies and local entrepreneurs, that's also a way of making people involved, appreciating the benefits of what we do, and also delivering more service. I was in a session earlier this week about how we can advance nature-based solutions, and I think it's getting people into that equation and making people involved, and the local at the local level where we have those solutions implemented so they can reap the benefits and feel ownership. I think it's really it's really key. But I think also we should acknowledge that Johannes and I, we don't have all the answers to these questions. So I would also be happy if someone here in the audience or online actually helped to respond to the questions as well. You don't necessarily have to put a new question. You can also help by sharing maybe some reflections or responses to questions that have been put forward. So we make this interactive.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So we have a question online, but I did want to comment on the gentleman's question over there about communications and your points, Johannes. I think that we've been talking a lot about being inside the water box. And, of course, us here in this room, we love World Water Week, but it's been said over and over again that we don't go to these other conferences. So I think that that's also true for communications. So when you were speaking, I was thinking about what the advice I would have given you would be to get involved in World Water Day, share your stories. We'd love to have them. We'll take them up. We'll share them for you. But then I kind of changed my answer and went, yeah, get involved in World Water Day, but get also involved in all the other UN international days. Those are great opportunities for small and medium enterprises to really get their messages out. And the UN is there to help you do that. So I think that that's something that we do need to kind of think more strategically on. But Chang and I are we're taking the questions from the online chat, and we have a really good one here that is from Evaristo Mapedza, who says, funding has been raised a number of times as a major challenge. Do we, however, have a poverty of good or bankable water ideas as well?
Do we have a... Can you repeat?
So in addition to the funding problem that we have in terms of the actual funds and money, do we also have poverty of good water ideas as well? Or do we have poor water ideas?
Yeah, probably we have that, and it is that's why we have the innovation pillar in the global acceleration framework. So I think that we don't have enough good ideas. There was the Junior Stockholm Water Prize yesterday, where you can see what the youth can bring to that. So there were really cool ideas there yesterday. I was really impressed by those ideas that think out of the box. So I don't know, I was really impressed, especially by one young lady who said, I'm using magnetism to collect plastic, and everybody has told me at the start plastic is not magnetic, how do you want to do it? And she found a solution. So that's really inspired. That's much cooler than what I did in my whole life. It's really impressive. And I think we lack ideas. We need to spark that innovation.
Right.
And Joachim, you have worked much longer in the field. I don't know, do you want to reflect on that?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. And well, my reflection is this. Let's maybe create a mechanism at national level or subnational level even to gather project ideas and at different scales. Maybe what we're talking about in our report can inspire what kind of projects are needed, what action is needed. A conference like this certainly, highlights quite a lot in terms of different types of projects that are needed. Because I think that we too often, honestly, find ourselves in a supply situation where there is funding. It's true there is funding, and this funding is channeled and organizations, larger organizations maybe, not necessarily in the UN, but also in the private sector and NGOs, we kind of try to find the projects, develop the projects, and often we do that, of course, in interaction with stakeholders locally. But if there were more, anchored project proposals and ideas to tap into, that would be a great thing. I think it's a good idea.
Anybody else on that topic or another one? Here I see some gentlemen in the back.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Is that on? Hello. My name is Mark Smith. I'm from the UK, and I've worked in water all my career, both in Europe and internationally. And just some reflections, really. I find SDG 6, we're coming to the same point with SDG 6 that we are afraid to grasp with 1.5 degrees. We're probably not going to hit it in 2030, right? And I think somebody said it was half time. Mm-hmm. I think it's way past half time. I think we're in about the 85th minute and we're losing 3-0. But I've never known a water problem that hasn't been solvable when we deploy the right finances, resources, get local stakeholders involved. Mm-hmm. So I think we're just struggling with some sort of a tipping point. It's almost like a human thing that we have to get to. The fire has to be burning before we put it out. Mm-hmm. And I don't think enough people think the fire is burning. No. And I think that is a failure of communication from us as water sector people to the, I don't want to say youth because that's patronising, I think, to just public who aren't immersed in this as much as. And when I listened to the session, I came in here this morning, again, hoping somebody would say, there's a roadmap and there's not, or there's a plan and there's not, or somehow we will get there, and I don't think we will. That's not to say we should give up because 2030 is gone. I think maybe it is 2035. But I'm just wondering, are we too internalized? Do we need more motivation? Do we need to almost hand over this problem to people who aren't experts in water and more experts in human motivation? I really struggle, as a water expert. As I say, I'm quite comfortable if somebody gives me a problem, I either know how to fix it or I know somebody who knows how to fix it. So I don't think that's the issue. I think it's just, is the platform burning enough for us? Mm-hmm. Just some thoughts, sorry.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah. Where you go first.
Should I? Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Just quickly back to you then. It sounds to me that you're saying that there isn't enough crisis awareness. I'm just challenging you a little bit. I'm not saying that you're wrong. But we're trying our very best now. We're putting out a report saying that we have to increase the pace 6 times. In terms of half time, no, we're way beyond half time in terms of implementation. But on a timeline, we're halfway to 2030, a little bit beyond. That's what I meant, at least. But look, so how should we create this crisis awareness? We're trying to do it now at the highest level in the UN. I think media today is doing it every day. We have floods, droughts, and fires, and water-related problems all over the world being pumped out every day. So I'm just questioning, look, what needs to happen more? The crisis awareness is kind of apparent to me, but we need to translate that into addressing the issues. And you're saying that the solutions are available. But how do we bring them out to scale? How do we get them to the ground? How do we get them to happen? I'm just trying to have a dialogue with you.
No, that's fine. I think you're right. I think certainly in the UK, the media reporting, scientific media reporting in mainstream media is appalling. It talks about weather. You're right. Last year in the UK we had drought conditions. And there was lots of conditions, talking about leaks, talking about water consumption. The minute it rained, that all disappeared. We don't talk about it anymore until it floods, and then we'll talk about it. Right. So to me, you're right. And I guess my question is not to say what I'm not the type of I'm not a motivator. I'm not the lady who does all the marathons, I think, and gets people moving like Greta Thunberg and all that. I'm just saying somehow my perception from where I sit as a water expert is that the solutions are there. The technical solutions are there. The motivation perhaps isn't. And I'm not saying the UN isn't doing enough. One thing I am pleased about, actually, this week, really, I should say this, is finally I'm hearing people saying we're not doing enough and saying it very loudly. And I think that needs to be portrayed more and more.
I think a part of you address a problem that I think a lot of us are reflecting about a lot. And I think sometimes the best way, and I am speaking now from my point of view and my expertise, but maybe Mohammed or Hannah or anybody else would say something different, and you can also answer this thing. I think what we need to do is we need to agree on those main issues that we have to have as control variables in my technical or scientific speak when we do things. And those can be, for example, I don't know, if we want to go from extractive to inclusive systems, that then in water translation, that is, recycled water must be cheaper in the market than pristine water. It makes no sense to mine it from glaciers in Greenland. That's dumb. Let's make it a priority to recycle water. Or we must rehydrate our environment. We have dehydrated our soils, our agricultural systems, and now the rice thing is super good. It will save water in the production, but will it also increase the carbon content in our rice fields? I hope so. So we have some basic principles that we need to rally behind, and that will ease that problem of, I think, focusing attention on the main issues. And you can now also frame this in a human rights dimension or sanitation or whatnot. But really, I would be happy if some of our panelists or other people want to chip in. I see some, I don't know, Hannah or Christine, do you want to?
Pass it back to you.
Or
I think that's a really valid point, and I will probably just take off my Bayer hat and really speak kind of openly about where I've seen how kind of incentivization is what's kind of needed for the water sector to be where, in my view, where carbon market is, right? Only the last 5 to several years, the voluntary carbon market has completely boomed. And now all financial institutions, all companies, all individuals are talking about the carbon, right? I mean, it was a concept that literally came out of thin air. Now, this is why taking kind of, not to draw any parallel, not to say that this is exactly what we need to do in the water market, but we have to think about what are the business models that will create the true valuation of water. And I think the monetization of water has to be thought of as how do we make it an investable asset for financial markets to really latch on, for investors to come in and invest to greener infrastructure, and for more communities to come and be vocal about why water matters. And that starts with really data. And I go back to what UN has put together as a roadmap in terms of data, governance, financing. Those are really important for us to really move the water sector to really to value it properly, right? And there's been a lot of subsidies in water to, not necessarily reflect the right cost of water in many markets. So I think this is why one of the examples in Bayer, when we're talking about actually the direct seeded rice, the key part of in the initial short term is to really incentivize farmers through carbon market so that there's a practice changes. It's not necessarily a long-term solution, right? But this is how I was actually in a few sessions this week. How do we tap on in the short term on the carbon financing for the water sector? Because this is an actual concrete framework today, right? So I think that's kind of where I just want to put in a little bit more of a commercial hat onto how do we scale the conversations about water and taking it to the next level. And I completely agree with you on the communication side. I think my background's a little bit on the marketing branding. We need to make water top of mind. And I see that actually happening locally as well in Singapore, which is a country where I live. Now, people are not talking about climate. They're talking about water. And only, I think, it was a recent development. It's coming into people's agenda. It's coming into the youth agenda, young professionals. And more tech companies are focused on water tech. And I think that's a really good sign of how this industry is moving.
Yeah. Kristin, do you want to?
If I may, yes. I also have some reflections on the communication aspect. So the last couple of days, we were talking to quite a lot of people, including some of the disaster management agencies that are our counterparts. And the realization that we had is we see a lot of disasters when we switch on the TV, when we open newspapers, that gets reported a lot. But what happens if a disaster doesn't happen because the measures to prevent it are so good? That doesn't get reported. So In the Swedish case, for example, last year there were lots and lots of fires. This year, very, very few, but it doesn't get reported that actually the fire gets prevented right away because the measures are so good. So I think we need to do more to actually put more information out there of what has worked and what works in the success stories and how these plans and roadmaps actually can help us. A second point on the comment around we're still lacking roadmaps. I think actually sometimes we have too many. And I think Mina said it very well, that our asks are so many that sometimes we don't know anymore where to start or where to act. So for us, and this is what we've been discussing in the context of UN Water and the UN system-wide strategy, is really to see how can we reconcile this and how can we make sure that we're all working towards the same goal and taking common steps towards this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We have only a few more minutes, and I really have to leave 1 minute before our session ends, but my twin brother, who is indistinguishable from or we are the same, will stay, and I don't know if we have to leave the room at 10:30 or yeah, we have to. So we need to come to a closure anyway. I don't know. Is there a last very quick question that we can take?
There was myself
okay.
and Josh, so I don't know, since Josh is one of the co-writers of the report. But I just, Maggie White from COE, Stockholm International Water Institute, excellent work on the synthesis report. Thank you so much for the blueprint. And I was just thinking around the finance element again, and piggybacking what you were saying, Hannah, but also the excellent question coming from Mark behind. I mean, we know where the problems are. I think we need to be a bit more bold sometimes on the how and what to do. And we often hear in finance, there's not enough ODA, there is money, but it's not being spent well enough. And I'm thinking, there's such a problem when it comes to public procurement, because a lot of money gets stuck there, whether it's from multilateral agencies or bilateral agencies. And maybe it could be interesting at the UN, for UN Water, since we're talking about the UN system, is to see what is blocking when it comes to big UN programs that are working with water. How can we unlock some of those finances and enable small and medium-sized companies, NGOs, indigenous peoples, groups, and young people to also be a part of that program? Can we find a way to be a bit more innovative in the way the funding is done, whether it's creating like a fund on the side to enable creative ideas, small companies who don't have the financial risk aspects, but to bring them in and to work together so we can leverage even more, not only the projects and the programs, but also the stakeholders around it, and be much more cooperative on the ground instead of having so many separate projects, because a lot is already being done, but it's maybe not being done in the most efficient way. Yeah.
I think there are two direct main things that I want to throw in, and then I have to run, and then my twin brother can continue. The one problem is corruption and misuse, and we have to openly address that. That's not only a problem in some crazy country somewhere far away. That's there are big companies where I come from that have behaved very fishy in the past years. So, and that's one reason why we have all this hoo-hoo, we have to control everything. So that is one big problem. And the other big problem is that we don't have a diverse enough system of giving finances to a diverse ecosystem of innovators, small companies, and so forth. And this is like if you have one big field that is only corn, then you have only corn. But if you have a diverse field, then your risk of failure is smaller. And I think that is something where we need to de-risk it again. De-risking is a big thing here, and de-risking also means to acknowledge that we can fail and that we can lose money here and there, and we just have to acknowledge that and build that in and be transparent and honest about it. So now I have to go, otherwise my president will be disappointed if I don't show up. But Joachim, maybe you can close this, and also if you want to say some words on the financing. Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you again.
Thank you, Johannes. Yes, thank you. Such a rich session, and we've come to the end. I'll just share a few highlights that we've touched on. We've talked about the need of bringing young people and having a more, you could say, vertical integration, not just between generations, but also from global processes, research, science, innovation, policy, bring it down to the ground practice, bringing local people involved. We heard also the need for infrastructure, including investments in dams and other things like that, and bringing in also nature-based solutions and bridging also development and humanitarian aspects. We didn't talk too much about that, but I think that's also a very important field. Going beyond SDG 6, yes, of course. And also how we can unlock financing and also tap into projects and develop projects on the ground, and how those benefits can be felt. So we engage and get people with us. I think this discussion about crisis awareness is very important. And I think you're right, Mark, there that, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So somewhere we have to make sure, I mean, it's sad, but it's also true, that when there's a crisis, when we had COVID, everybody addressed COVID, right? Now we're having floods, droughts, fires, all sorts of water-related major crises. Can we utilize this in a good way to advance the whole SDG 6 agenda? That's where I'll end up. And thank you very much all for coming.